EM Weekly is starting right now.
Hi, and welcome to EM Weekly. This is your host, Todd DeVoe, with you. And, well, I guess the New Year's dream of not having any major disasters come across the United States and the world has really quickly failed on that one. The winter storms hit hard. Rivers are freezing over. The ocean's coming into Massachusetts and freezing cars into the ground. It's amazing, the weather events that we're having here. Today, I was listening to a different podcast. It's actually on NPR, and they were following global warming issues and the weather patterns and these things, and how they're affecting us. And whether you believe that global warming is man-made, or it's not, or it's cyclical, or whatever those issues that are going, and that's whatever the political side of it is, we got to agree that there's something going on here and that we have to plan for it. I'm looking to bring in a weather expert specifically to talk about global warming or weather pattern changes, climate change, whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just talking factual aspects of the fact that we have areas that are really being impacted by storms. Whether it's cyclical or not, it's besides the point. The fact of the matter is that as emergency managers, we have to take that into consideration. So if you have any comments or anything, please go to EM Weekly and pop in there and tell me how you feel, and let's discuss it. Let's not avoid this conversation about what is looking right now as far as weather and how it's impacting us as emergency managers, whether it's droughts in California with the wildfires going on, or whether it's that are we out of drought? We're not sure. We're talking about California being back in the drought. The weather patterns that are hitting Houston, the reason why there's floods there, some of the issues that are associated with that, and also the concepts of, are we as emergency managers doing the right thing? Are we being involved in the planning of cities where they are building more buildings in hazard zones, and how does that impact us as emergency managers and how we respond to disasters and how we respond to events, that type of thing. I was just thinking, realistically, we talked about the fact that if you had an earthquake and there weren't any buildings, is it truly a disaster or just a geological event, right? So if it's a 7.0 earthquake that happens in the middle of the desert and nothing occurs where damage occurs to any buildings, it's really just a geological event. So when we're building buildings in areas where historically have burned or flooded, are we creating or allowing the creation of disasters and emergencies to occur? So chew on that for a little bit. And again, just let me know how you feel in the comments below as far as that goes. So also, I'd love to have you guys come and be part of the EM Weekly community on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Instagram as well. We're sharing a lot of good information there, and also just pushing out news stories from around the globe through those mediums as well. So it's not just about what we're talking about here on EM Weekly. We're also sharing other ideas and stories that are happening around the world. So if you want to stay informed, love to have you join those groups as well. This week's a unique episode. We're actually doing 3 separate interviews, and it's around the theme of veteran services. And why is that an emergency management issue? It's debatable, right? So you have the increasing in homeless veteran population around the country. You have the 22 every day where veterans are killing themselves, and you have other services such as schools and job placement and things like this that aren't being necessarily utilized by veterans, and that we need to get our veterans to be gainfully employed to be productive citizens once they get out in the transition. So what I have here today is we're speaking to High Caliber Community, which is an app for veterans. Even if you're not a veteran and you have people that are veterans or that you're working out in the field with them, this is an app that you can turn them on to where they can find other veterans in the area and services that they can use. The second group we're speaking to is called Warrior Built, and Warrior Built is a nonprofit organization that is doing recreational therapy right here in Southern California, and they're growing. So they're starting another one in Lejeune to be Warrior Built east. So they're working on that right now. That's their goal, to have another Warrior built east in by the end of this year, I believe. And then again, it's another organization that you could put veterans in place with. And one of the things that they're really doing a lot of work with as well is the PTSD portion of it, working with the PTSD Foundation. So another resource that you can turn people on to during a crisis are those two organizations. Third one that we're interviewing today is called Clever Talks, and this is a unique aspect where they are bringing guests in to speak to veterans about business and leadership and just everyday programs for veterans. And it's almost like the TED Talks, if you will. All right. And this is called Clever Talks. Based out of San Diego. I had the opportunity to go to one of their shows. It was amazing. They get CEOs, thought leaders from around the country. Mark Cuban was part of their program. They don't pay their CEOs and stuff. These guys are taking their time to come and speak at the Clever Talk. There is a fee to go into Clever Talks. There's really cool stuff there. They had booths and from other organizations from all over the country regarding education, jobs, service organizations that were based on veterans. And so it was a really good experience to be down there and see it firsthand and how that worked. So those are the areas that we're speaking into today. And I want, as emergency managers, we need to think outside of that proverbial box, if you will, because there are more things that are being put on our plates as our profession grows. If you think about what they're doing in Seattle, using the emergency manager to work with the homeless. And so this is the type of stuff that we need to think about if we're going to be doing those other programs of how can we get services for people. So I hope you enjoy the interviews, and we'll look forward to you seeing you guys out there on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And anyway, enjoy. I have Alyssa Quinn with me. She's the founder of High Caliber Community, which is a vet app. For lack of a better term, it's going to sound silly, Alyssa, but the way I can explain it, it's like a dating app, but you're not trying to date anybody. You're just trying to find friends.
Yeah.
So, Alyssa, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the veteran space. Obviously as a veteran, but how you got involved in the veteran space and what you're trying to do with the High Caliber Community.
I had joined the Iowa National Guard as a medic about 9 years ago now. And when I had joined as a medic, after training, I came back home to my unit and geared up to deploy with that unit. And I was injured at MOB site. I had my lower back injured pretty badly. And I think that's important to tell, just because I am the only one on our founding team who's not a combat vet, but that has not deterred me from doing this. And I think it's important to remember that, we all serve in different ways, in different capacities. But anyways, when I came back and I was injured and had to fight to stay in the Guard, and I won that fight, and I was able to prove that I could still do my tasks and duties. But I knew I wanted to be in the uniform more often, and I loved it. So I ended up searching across the nation for different full-time National Guard jobs, and I found a weapons of mass destruction response team in California, which was all full-time Guard. I applied for different positions on those teams, and I think it was probably the third or fourth time I applied that they flew me out and interviewed me, and then they ended up hiring me. So I was on the civil support team, is what they're referred to in the first responder community in Northern California. And I was out there for about 4 years. Towards the end of that time that I was out there, you live in California. Sometimes people they're not as friendly in California. And it depends on where you're at, of course. But where I was up just south of Oakland, in the East Bay, it's hard to go out and meet people. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. It's not like anywhere else in the country I've been. So I was actually, towards the end of my time there, I knew, I voluntarily resigned after about 4 years. I was ready for a new challenge in life. So I had resigned. I was training my replacement and getting ready to come back to Iowa, but I was still missing social connections. So I was actually using dating apps at the time to find people to hang out with, just I want to go play shuffleboard at a bar and drink some beer.
Right.
And as I was using these dating apps, first of all, a dating app is a horrible way to find a friend. And at the time, there weren't any, dating apps for, just social interactions other than, maybe Facebook, but Facebook didn't really link you with people, in your community. So, I was using these dating apps, and Tinder was one of the main ones. And I found when I was going through Tinder, people I would meet who did not have a military background, it was very difficult for me to just go out casually with them because the question would always come up, well, what do you do? And I would say, well, I'm in the Army National Guard. I'm a full-time National Guard soldier. I'm on a, you want to be careful about what you say. I'm on a first response team because you don't want people to misunderstand or freak out and oh my gosh, there were always just crazy questions from people because they didn't understand. And after telling that story so many times, I finally decided, you know what, if I'm going to use Tinder, I'm going to be looking for people who have a military background. And I'm not kidding you, it was 1 in every 100 on there. Either said they were a vet or had an old photo of them in uniform. And anytime I would see one of those guys or gals in uniform, I was like, yes, I hit gold. Finally, I got someone who's like me. And, this is all in California, all happening when I was living in California. And it was on Veterans Day 2016. I had matched with a former Marine on Tinder, and I told him the whole spiel. I said, "Hey, I'm just looking for buddies to hang out with, and you're a military guy, so you get it. Do you want to meet up on Vets Day and have a beer?" So while we're sitting there at the bar that night, he starts telling me about his time with the Marines and his deployments and how he missed his buddies. And I thought, man, it was like a light bulb. It just went, man, wouldn't it be cool if Tinder did something like this for vets,
right.
but not for dating? Yeah. Not for dating, not for anything, because, of course, first of all, the ratio was not good. And second of all, I don't want to deal with fraternization. And that's not what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for a date. I was just looking for buddies like me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it really started, was just this idea of, well, why isn't there something that's exclusive for vets to help them connect with other people in their communities who have similar interests and a similar, military background, of course. So it started with this very premature thought, and then it grew into a whole bunch of other things, and then scaled back down to what we're launching now, which is an app that is exclusive to military vets, current service members, retirees, whatever category you're in. As long as you at one point have signed a document, you have worn a uniform, you can be verified by our partners at ID.me. And once you get into the profile, select your hobbies, enable your location, and you can connect with people nearby.
So you decided, okay, I needed to find a way to find friends. This Tinder thing is kind of a cool idea. It doesn't really work for what I'm trying to do. So you come up with this app. So how did you develop the app? What was that process like?
Well, we've had to get investment because technology is expensive. And I will, I'd be the first to tell people, a lot of times people say, well, why didn't you do a nonprofit? Maybe you could have raised money through donations. And that was my first thought back in, it was probably last December, was the first developer I had talked to. So I got this idea for this app. Here's what I want to do. I want to do it nonprofit. And thankfully, that person I spoke with was very honest with me. And he said, if you want to do this as a nonprofit, good luck. Because when you develop an app, like I said, it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of consistency. It takes a lot of action to get this thing going. You don't want it to just kind of function. You want it to function well. So he had said, if you want it to be nonprofit, you're not going to get the funding you need. You might, but it's going to be a lot harder. We worked on structuring the company, and we worked on doing all the first steps you take. Little things like filing the EIN, filing the patent, working on customer discovery, all these things that go into starting a business. And I had a hard time with the idea of asking people for money because I've never done that in my life. But finally, one of my mentors told me, he said, Alyssa, you're not asking people for money. You are giving them an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than them that helps America's veterans. And who doesn't want to be part of that?
Right.
So, yeah, when he explained it to me that way, that really sunk in. And I went, holy cow, you're right. Because hopefully, we get these investors that come in and we make something that's really great, and it ends up being this wonderful product for our veterans, and our investors get the money back. Hopefully it all works out well, but that was how we've been able to fund it so far. And yeah, our development team's really great. They gave us a grant as well. So funding has, we haven't raised a whole lot, but enough to at least get the first version developed.
Now that you're going forward, how are you reaching out to veterans? And this is a two-part question here. And the second thing is, how do you think you're going to be able to use this app to be able to help veterans kind of, I guess, transition back into civilian life and or into some sort of normalcy?
So the way we're reaching out to vets in the community now is really by word of mouth and social media. I mean, just in this last week or two, I've gotten phone calls from vets and literally more than 1,500 miles away from each other, people who don't have any relation with one another, just different parts of the country who are hearing about this by word of mouth, which is amazing. And that's how I want this to really grow, is organically, because people who share it word of mouth, they really believe in it. So that's the hope. But other than that, we're using, social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, newsletters to our website, keeping people up to date on our progress. Pretty standard stuff. But yeah, word of mouth is ideal. And then for the transition, how this is really gearing to help vets, we did a survey a few months ago, and we asked specifically, how would you rate your transition? And then what's the number one thing you would say is most difficult or was most difficult about your transition? And this again went back into how we selected how this app would launch, or what we would release first, I guess. But the number one response for transition difficulty was finding connections. That was repeatedly the number one thing. And then the number two thing was finding stable employment. So we looked at our plans and we said, okay, when we launch this app, we want to make sure we're helping provide the connections. So that way, when you get out of the military and you go back home, and I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So say I'm active duty, I come back home to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I'm just not relating as well with my friends and family. Or like a lot of people do, they come back and there's not as much structure and they're just kind of aggressive and confused, or it's just not the same, and you want to be around people who are like you. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step. Let's connect people with people who understand. Someone that's your brother or sister who lives in your community and who gets it. That's the first thing. The next thing we want to do is to match vets with resources in their communities, whether it's, something that's online or something that's, within their city. Things like a good example that I always think of is Hire Heroes USA, mm-hmm. which is a nonprofit that helps vets build their resumes and does interview coaching and all these things. So a lot of people just don't know about these organizations. So if we've got a platform that's, a social connection tool for vets, and we get enough people in there, and then we can include things like resources near them, even down to connecting people with their local veteran services officer, things like that. That's the route we want to go with this.
Have you reached out to any of the established veterans organizations, reaching out to them to Warrior Build or Team Rubicon or Red, White, and Blue, those organizations that are doing some of this stuff? And are they going to be partnering with you on this app or working with you on that?
Ideally, what we can do is partner together with these organizations, and we would both be listed on each other's platforms as a resource. So I think it's incredibly important. All these organizations, we all are working for very similar things, and it's to empower and uplift vets, and make sure that veterans come back and become contributing members of society, and that this 22 a day number goes down significantly. We're all working towards these common goals, and I don't believe this kind of fight can be won alone. Honestly, if this fight could be won alone, the VA would have won.
Right.
One single place, one single app, one single nonprofit organization, it's not working, just one. We have to work together on this. So yeah, absolutely, I want to partner with these guys, and we've reached out to a few. I think a lot of the problem, one of the challenges, I guess, that we have in this, it's kind of like the best way to describe it is, like a preteen teenager, where they're not a child, but they're not quite yet a teenager or an adult. That's kind of where the phase that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. We've got the foundation, we're building it, we're beta testing the app. But yeah, we've reached out to a few, and they're busy just like we are. And like I said, right now we're kind of in that awkward stage where people probably aren't so sure, what we are or what we're doing. So once we get out in the market, hopefully that mind shift will happen.
So this organization called 10C, and it's a one-stop center for people that are looking for, well, number one, if you're a nonprofit, you can go there and you can get information about starting a nonprofit in Orange County. If you're a person who's looking for volunteer opportunities, you can go to the 10C, and they will hook you up with your skill set to a nonprofit.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And I sort of
Yeah,
see
that's
you
really
guys doing
cool.
that.
When people come into the app, the High Caliber Community, or HC2 for short, HC2 is a lot easier to say. When they come into the app, they put a little bit about their military background, and then it's almost like a game where you select your hobbies and interests. And one of the hobbies that you can select is volunteering. So, I mean, wouldn't it be neat if down the road, and we are in, we've got a community in the High Caliber app built up in Orange County, we can identify who in that area is interested in volunteering and then direct message all those people, or, put out in the group forum in Orange County, say, hey, here's this organization that helps connect you with volunteer opportunities.
So listen, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or a hold of the app, or at least the website, how can we find you?
Our website is highcalibercommunity.com. So they can go there. We also have Facebook and Instagram at High Caliber Community, and Twitter is HighCalCom. And of course, any of the founders can be reached, through the contact form on the website or through direct messaging on Facebook. We all monitor it. We all take turns answering questions. So
okay, and here's the toughest question of the day. So what book would you recommend to somebody who is just starting to get into this area?
I have a little bit of a backstory with my book idea, I guess. The book I would recommend, I'm sure other people have said it on your podcast before, but the book I would recommend is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And the reason for that is there was this guy that he was wonderful, and he impacted my life in a lot of ways. And he's not alive anymore, but he had written me a letter at one time about this book he had read. And he said in the letter that he read about the 10,000 hours. And this was a few years ago, but in the letter he said, I read about this 10,000 hours and I couldn't stop thinking about you. And I know as soon as you find your thing, you're going to find your 10,000 hours and you're going to make it great. Mm-hmm. And I'm paraphrasing his letter, but it was something very similar to that. But I went back and I read that book after he passed away, and I read that piece about the 10,000 hours, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I remember one day, maybe back in February, when I started working on this project, and I realized this is big. This is not a small hobby. This is a lifestyle change. This is a big project, and I have to be fully committed. And I started to doubt it. And I was like, man, do I really want to do this? And all of a sudden, I kid you not, his face just lit up the sky, and I just heard it 10,000 hours. It's over and over, just his smile and 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours. This is it. Do it. So that book, I would encourage anybody to read, even if you don't have your idea yet or something you're, really passionate about and working on, to read that and to realize that, first of all, there are no overnight successes and things will be hard. But if you're willing to dedicate your life and at least 10,000 hours to the thing that matters most, you will accomplish great things.
Wow. That's real powerful right there. That's been the best recommendation we've had so far, and that's great. Wow. So
good.
So, first, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us here at EM Weekly. Just want to let everybody know that I'm passionate about this app. I'm actually one of the beta testers, and the website is really put well together. I think this is going to be something that's going to be a game changer for lots of people, and it's going to impact veterans' lives in a positive way. So, all right, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Todd.
We'll be back right after this short break.
Emergencies happen, whether they're related to medical emergencies, threats of physical violence, weather-related, or other. One of the most difficult things during an emergency is to find help and quickly and efficiently communicate with all parties, regardless of whether you're an administrator, law enforcement, or the end user. With Titan HST, we help to store time by creating high-tech, yet simple-to-use mobile-based applications that connect you with the people who can help you. At Titan HST, we believe in the power of people.
Hi, this is Todd DeVoe from EM Weekly. If your company is in the emergency management and response space, EM Weekly is a place for you to advertise. Each week, we bring in experts in emergency management, response, and leadership from around the world, and they're here to share their best practices. Our listeners are eager to learn about new products and ideas, so this is the space for you. For more information, please contact Brian at brian@emweekly.com.
Welcome back from that short break, and let's continue on.
Hey guys, I'm here with former Navy Chief Aaron Siebert. He is a combat wounded veteran. He's part of a nonprofit organization called Warrior Built, and he works with the PTSD Foundation. So, Aaron, welcome to EM Weekly.
Oh, thanks, Todd. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with what you're doing and what kind of projects you guys are working on.
All right, well, I'm Aaron Siebert. Again, Todd had mentioned I'm a retired Navy chief. Luckily, I made it there. In 2006, I was hit with a mortar round my third time over to Iraq as part of a military Iraqi transition team, helping the Iraqis take over their country. As a part of a 10-man team, in April of 2006, I was hit with over 100 pieces of shrapnel, and my last rites read to me. Basically, I'm on life number 2. I'm lucky to be alive, so I ended up being the command chief of Wounded Warrior Battalion West, which is owned by the Marine Corps. It's Wounded Warrior Battalion West and East are really designed to take on the injuries of combat to ill and guys that have been injured in motor vehicle accidents to just accidents in general. And in doing that, I basically was taking care of veterans, taking care of our military, taking care of guys that are combat wounded. I myself was there going through a lot of processes on my own, dealing with my own stuff. I retired in 2011, and I said, hey, I still want to be part of something. I still am part of Wounded Warrior Battalion West, getting down there on Wednesdays and running a PTSD group there for the combat vets. And then I train in an underwater treadmill that has helped my physical injuries to all these other things that I kind of brought with me to Warrior Built. Nick Ham, the president of Warrior Built, but he wanted to specify, hey, I want something for combat vets where they can come together and have like-minded situations and environments where they can share and thrive. And so it's a vocational recreational therapy piece. We have a motorcycle race team that goes down and races Baja. Inside our facility, we have a music room where guys could come in and jam out and just have some other aspects of releasing some of the tension that might build up from combat. We have a gym downstairs that allows the guys to come in if they want and utilize that. And then we have a lounge where, warrior groups are ran through the PTSD Foundation of America, of which I'm part of that as well. And we run groups out of there on Tuesday nights. And a lot of things happen at night. During the day, the guys can come in, but, guys work, and we also want to have the environment for them to be able to do so. Wednesday nights is photography night, and guys come in for that. And Thursday nights, our softball team gets together that we just started probably about 4 months ago, and it's taking shape. That's a suggestion from one of the combat vets. They come in here like, hey, can I learn how to weld? Yes. Can I start a softball team? Yes. So it happens. Then these guys start to develop relationships. They start hanging out, and they start camaraderie that they had when they were in the military, and they're able to thrive and share and move on with their lives, hopefully in a better condition. If they're going to work and they're just going home and work, the environment might not work out for them, and they might need this extra piece to have that camaraderie that gives them the outlet so that they're not taking this home to the family, and they're not taking it to work with them. They have a place where they can actually release some of that tension, the rigors of dealing with society after getting out, and not having a combat buddy that you might have had when you were in and developing that. So that just gives you some insight as to what it's all about, and I'm happy to be part of it. I feel like it's a support network that I had when I was in, and I still have. I kind of took the uniform off just to put another one on that's still doing the same exact job that I was doing then, just in a different format and different uniforms. So, yeah.
So it's great. So it's a continuous service type thing. That's awesome. So, I mean, as a vet, you get out especially after combat, and transition back to civilian life is really difficult. Talk a little bit about what work you're doing right now with helping those vets transition from the military life, combat life, and into civilian, just everyday life.
Yeah, a lot of us, are getting out, and we're going to be paid for the rest of our life because of our injuries, because of dealing with things, or whatever the situation is. And sometimes these guys feel like they want to work, but they feel like maybe they're not going to be that great of an employee because they have VA appointments, they have situations that they're dealing with, things that are kind of like popping off, and they're unsure of how to go about it. And so, we have the computer stations upstairs for guys to work on their resumes, to the VA paperwork to whatever. But I also have employers coming in here and asking the guys, saying, hey, can we get these guys a job? Some of these guys are like, yeah, I'll take that job. It's a good job. How can I do it? But working with the employer's already under the understanding, hey, these guys may have 2 days off next week because they have a VA appointment, and they have VA appointments every month, or they have VA appointments every week. So can you, instead of giving them a $50,000 package, give them a $40,000 package, but understand they need the leeway to deal with all these situations that arise on their system. So most of the guys that I work with, they come through here, and the employers that want to hire these guys put it out, hey, here's the job title. But in order for a combat vet to get to that person, they'll come through me and say, hey, I'd like to work there. At the same time, I'm able to evaluate and see if there's anything Warrior Built or the PTSD Foundation of America or any other organization might be able to help these guys out with to ensure that it's a successful job opportunity. Now, most of these guys get out and they're in their lanes. They're doing what they want. They're doing what they need to do, and they're taking care of business. And I've only gotten like 5 or 6 guys jobs out of here in the last 2.5 years, but it's mainly because these guys are already on their own path. They just need a little extra help with some things. And some other job opportunities that come up from here may transition into that job, but they already have the benefit of the doubt that the employer is understanding what they're getting and why they're getting them and who they're taking on. So it's an important, cool factor for sure.
What's the most common issue you've seen with that transition period?
Well, the transition, what happens is, a lot of these guys, they go home to, middle America, they go home to wherever their home's at, and they basically they're so used to, and I'll say, the military is a very catering concept. I mean, you're there, your housing's covered, everything, you got all these allotments set up, you're covered with everything, your medical's taken care of, this and that. When you get out, it all falls back on you as an individual. So you become super overwhelmed with all the taskers at hand, that it sometimes overwhelms them to the point where they just rather stay in their house and not really be that functional, or they might get out and about, but they're not really engaging in too much because they're already dealing with, hey, I got to pay this bill, I got to pay that bill now. The allotments that were set up in the military are no longer allotments. Now I have bills coming to me, and how am I going to manage all these different things and have a job and be this person that my family wants? When it comes down to it, medical is the last thing on anybody's mind when they're getting out. They're worried about the job. They're worried about how they're going to pay their bills. They're worried about all this. So they can come in kind of dealing with some things that they need to talk to some other vets about. To navigate the VA system might take about a 2-year process just to kind of feel comfortable about, going in and getting the benefits that they are supposed to be getting. So yeah, the biggest problems that I'm seeing with a lot of these guys coming through here is that the last thing on their mind is that medical piece. And we as veterans don't really always think about how we want to receive our medical care, how we want to deal with our medical care, and how we want to deal with the VA. And the VA sometimes gets a bad rap, but my experience with the VA has been outstanding. It's been working. I've gone in there and gotten the help that I needed. But you have to go through the process. It's a 2-year learning curve. And a lot of these guys, they're like, hey, I didn't even know this was part of it and that. And so when they get into the VA, it takes the 2-year process to really kind of get your system all squared away and get set up. And some of these guys haven't even done that. So they're missing out on some of the benefits by not being involved in that. And they're more worried about getting a job, or they're worried about just staying at home and not dealing with anything that's going on because it's too crazy outside the walls. And so that whole environment becomes kind of toxic, and getting those jobs and dealing with the medical care becomes a secondary thought. So helping them out with that is important. Helping them out from here, we got the computer they can get on and start working on their benefits, to guys, to VA people that I know, or personnel that I know that can help them and guide them through some of the processes that can really give them the benefits that they need for them as well as their families sometimes. The nonprofit organizations that we're with Warrior Built and the PTSD Foundation of America, Operation Silver Star, Iron Horse Marines, I can go through a long list of nonprofits that kind of funnel through here to also help our combat vets, because we're just one piece of the pie, and there's a lot of pieces that are out there that they don't really know that are resources for them. And it's not something, not all these vets want. They just come in here and they you don't really know what they need until something comes up. And so, yeah, those are the complications that arise the most.
Okay, so one of the things I know that you do is you work with local law enforcement to put them through training on how to deal with veterans issues, specifically the PTSD side of it, to be able to make those interactions a little less advantageous. What kind of program is that, and then how can somebody who would like to see that at their PD get a hold of you to have you come and teach those classes?
Yeah, I was at Wounded Warrior Battalion West. I got a request for the Riverside. Actually, it's Riverside Police Department. The negotiators had requested, hey, some information. They wanted to know about PTSD, and then they wanted to run some scenarios on how do we talk a guy that's dealing with combat PTSD or a combat vet down from a situation that he might be in, whether it's jumping off of a bridge to hostage situations to certain situations that they may deal with in a common way. They want to be trained on how to talk, how to better bring down a situation that may develop. So it's the Riverside negotiators that really got in touch with me, and they ever since then they kind of stayed in touch. They want a perspective from a combat vet versus sometimes the perspective from the like the psychologist or psychiatrist might look a little bit like it has nothing to do with their job. It gives them the meanings behind it, but it doesn't really give them the functionality of how to really deal with somebody that's dealing with PTSD. So they really like to kind of spend some time, and they asked if I'd continue doing these classes. So at a Warrior Built, actually on the 6th, we're going to actually have those guys down to go through a little bit of classes, ask the questions that they want to know, and help them understand the mindset of somebody dealing with PTSD or combat PTSD. Then they're going to run some scenarios and say, hey, can we talk you down from a bridge? And this is kind of cool because guys that are far enough along with dealing with their PTSD, it's a huge situation, but they're able to hopefully keep it in control and go through some processes in the deep parts of their brain you haven't touched on, but they're able to do so because they're going to get into that factor, get into that resistance to the situation that's coming up. They're going to get into some of the things that are going to trigger some stuff, but they're controlled triggers, and they're meant to be here for the purpose of helping out somebody else to understand, for the purpose of hopefully keeping somebody from dying suicide by cop, or dealing with situations that can hopefully be helped in that environment where the negotiator can talk them out of a situation that if they didn't have that line of communication, that they might not know to use this tactic. So overall, I think that's really a good aspect of it, and that's just one little piece of it. We have the fire department from Redlands that comes down here right before we go into Baja. And Todd, you yourself have been here to help get the guys spun up on basic first aid and starting IVs on guys if we're in an environment that is down there in Baja and we can't get anybody. So it's really, we can end up in situations where we really need that extensive medical care too. So that training takes into consideration. So we have a full-on class here, giving those guys that basic first aid and that tourniquet class and ABCs and just the basics on how to stay alive by yourself on a motorcycle out in the middle of nowhere. So there's a lot of aspects of emergency training, emergency medicine to, also, the mind and how to better help the police deal with guys that are dealing with PTSD. So we have those dynamics as well here at Warrior Built, and I think it's important that we have them. So yeah, I'm available. Just at Warrior Built, you can look it up online. My phone number's on there. I give my card out a lot of times. It's on Facebook. Aaron Siebert. If you look me up, it's AARON Siebert SEIBERT. Every week I usually post, that we're having our warrior groups at Warrior Built on Tuesday night, 7:30 to 8:30 for combat vets. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we have that are going on.
If somebody wanted to donate to the Warrior Built Foundation, how could they do so?
Yeah, if somebody wanted to donate to the Warrior Built Foundation, you can go right online to www.warriorbuilt.org, or just look up Warrior Built on Google, the Warrior Built Foundation will come up, and at the bottom of the page, as you scroll down, it'll say Warrior Built 501c3, of which we are. You can donate to Warrior Built. The PTSD Foundation's website is at the bottom too. You can click on that because we utilize a lot of their resources and help them out. And I run the PTSD groups or Warrior groups, so peer-to-peer mentor groups. And you can also donate to them as well through their website. There's a lot of other organizations. If Warrior Built isn't for you, or you want to know something else to donate to, then contact me. And I also have some of the other ones that we associate ourselves with and help that out. Yeah, definitely. www.warriorbuilt.org, or you can contact me if you have any questions. Aaron Siebert, my phone number, 951-805-2734. And you can get a hold of me on email at aaron.siebert@ptsdusa.org.
Well, that's awesome, Aaron. Thank you so much. And I know that you got a busy day going on here, so I'm going to go ahead and let you get going. But I just want to say, man, thanks a lot for what you're doing. I appreciate it. And just for clarification, Aaron and I did serve together for a bunch of years there in the Uncle Sam's Canoe Club and also with the Marine Corps. So Semper and Strength and Honor.
Strength and Honor, Todd. Thanks, brother. Out.
I am here with the creator of the Clever Talks. And Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got started with Clever Talks.
Absolutely. My name is Chris Soriano. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Clever Talk, and we share the ideas of our active duty and veterans throughout the nation. And this all happened, I'd say, about 3.5 years ago when I wanted to create a conference out here in San Diego. And I just wanted to create a conference to inspire other millennials like myself, because I think it's really good to surround yourself with like-minded people. And sure enough, after the conference, a lot of people came up to me and they would say like, oh yeah, I'm a former Navy SEAL, I'm a former, Special Forces operator, I'm a former Marine. And I'd meet all these great people and I'd be like, man, these people are too young to be formers. They look like my age. And long story short, I realized that I had something here and I wanted to nourish these relationships and make a nonprofit that helps support our military.
That's great. So I looked at some of your stuff online, the Clever Talks, obviously, and I was able to attend the Tactical Fest to witness this myself. So everybody out there, this is the real deal. Chris has a really good thing going. A lot of great people. Got to meet a lot of great people. I got to network with a lot of veterans and a lot of other veterans organizations. But the one underlying thing that I did take from this was leadership. And I think that the Clever Talks, in my mind, and just as no offense to the TED Talks, because I do enjoy those, but I think Clever Talks is like TED Talks, but cooler, So,
thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about a few of the guests that you've had on the Clever Talks.
Sure, and I appreciate first that you said that this has to deal with leadership, because that was like the original pillar of why we did this, right? To help people to become better leaders and lead in any way possible. Whether they're creating a nonprofit or a for-profit, or they're leading their troops out in the battlefield. Leadership is so important. So the guests that we've had are from YouTubers to even public figures like Shark Tank's Mark Cuban, veteran-owned businesses like Bottle Breacher, to even, YouTube celebrities like Prince E. So we've had a lot of diverse groups, but the mission and core of this is always to support our service members. One of those people, to give an example, who's a combination of both, who's a YouTuber as well as a veteran, is C.T. Fletcher. He's known for using profanity to inspire people to work out and lift, and he was able to speak on our platform to inspire our troops.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really awesome. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you started out in this endeavor.
I started off, I grew up here in San Diego. I was born in the Navy Hospital, right like a mile away from our office and our headquarters. And I never served. A lot of people say, how's this guy, this civilian, know anything about us? And I look at that as like, that's why I'm here. This is my chance to give back. And I feel that there's other ways to give back to your country. I'm a proud American. My father came here from the Philippines by serving in the Navy. My mother is a nurse. And, she's been doing that. My father's been doing that for years. And I just grew up with the military, culture. And I was always fascinated about it. I got a degree in communications and I wanted to pursue being an officer and going into the military. But then I was recruited to become a journalist. I ended up appearing on CNN, NBC, One American News. I was a journalist living that life, and I use those strengths to interview some of the speakers now that we have at Clever Talk.
Oh, wow, that's pretty exciting. The journalism background is definitely shows through with some of the speakers that you had and some of the conversations that you put up there. I find it really interesting that with some of the stuff that you've done, it's been really diverse, like you said before. One of the ones I liked so far was the Ted Williams speech, and he was able to get up there and inspire people with his story, and the other stories that were out there as well that are really inspiring. And it shows you that as long as you go forward and you can pull yourself up and you can go forward, you can go from being a guy who's living on the street to somebody who is now living the American dream again. How do you find these people?
Great question. I find these people by looking at some of the problems that our service members are dealing with and veterans. And it's based on an acronym called PMAF, which is physical, mental, and financial. Those are the three sectors which a lot of our service members are always dealing with some sort of trouble. So when it came to Ted Williams, here's a guy who was broke, homeless. Talk about no money. And he was able to use his talents, like his voice, right? He's the homeless man with a golden voice, is how he speaks about it, right? And he ended up, just saying, hey, how you doing, in his deep voice to try to make some spare change. And eventually he was able to get out of homelessness, and, he had a great story. But with the financial side, a lot of our service members are like, getting broke. And I'm like, who the hell could help them versus a billionaire, like Shark Tank's Mark Cuban? So I was able to get him to come out to speak. And all of our speakers have spoke for free. We never ask for any money. We never pay them. We do a mutual exchange because I make sure that whoever we put on that stage cares about the troops just as much as I do.
That is outstanding that these guys are taking on their time to come and speak to the veterans. And just for the record, I served as a Navy corpsman from 91 to 97. I served with the Marine Corps most of my time, so don't ask me Navy questions. I can't really answer them.
Well, thank you for your service and everything you do. Look how far you've come to still give back.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure, actually. But yeah, I mean, and giving back to the veterans themselves, there's a few nonprofits and stuff that my circles are in. And I do think it's important that we do understand that veterans definitely have a different view on life sometimes. And sometimes that view may get in the way of success because, and I mean this in the sense that it's really hard. Like I took from me personally, after I got out of the service, it probably took me a good, 5-6 years before I actually became friends with somebody who hasn't served. And it's
interesting.
Yeah, so I understand where they're coming from. And so you being able to bring people in that aren't service members and to show that they do care and they do understand, I think goes a long way healing some people who have been overseas and seen things that most people shouldn't see and that culture. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
What's in the future here for Clever Talks, and what direction are you guys trying to go?
So the direction we're trying to head into is being able to provide this to our troops on bases. We'd love to go to Afghanistan and Iraq, wherever these dangerous areas are, just so that our troops could take a second to realize that home is still here, and it's in sharing your ideas, it's in speaking about your story, and taking that piece back to the people here in San Diego or wherever they are. What I love about technology is that, people come to our conferences because they want to see all these, celebrities or whoever that are public figures, but the larger audience is online. It's not about those in the seat. And that's what I want the future to be. I want our service members who are on deployment to be able to, go to our website and see our talks and be uplifted. We all see so much negative news out there that they just, they could just look out in the field and realize, man, what do I have left? But when you could have that good inspirational talk, that's the fuel that keeps you going. And a lot of our service members sometimes forget why they're fighting. They know what they're doing. They know the mission. They know how to accomplish it, but they forget why they're fighting for that. And that's where all the complications start. We all want to do what matters and what we think what matters. And there's people like that just don't care and they just live life. Or there's people that, I want to live for a purpose. I want to do something that makes a difference. And, sometimes I forget, why did I even join? Or, why am I even here? And, a lot of bad things happen. But once they find the why again, they're back on track.
The why, that's my favorite question to ask. It truly is my favorite question to ask.
Right. And it changes, right? Some people's why changes all the time. They got a kid now. My why is my family. Or, no, I don't have a kid. I'm single and I dedicate myself to my nonprofit. And that's what I'm married to right now.
That's awesome. That is, and you're right. And we're always changing, we're always growing. And I think if you don't seek to grow, and if you don't, you're just going to become stagnant. And stagnation is what really kills the soul. And I think Clever Talks is a really great avenue to keep that soul from stagnating and asking that why question and really getting involved with the interesting conversations that people are having out there. So when's your next event, sir?
Our next one is in March, and we got another one in September. But our March event, we're still, tidying up the details, not to tease it too much, but we are in talks with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and also we are trying to figure out and solidify other big public figures such as Jocko Willink, even Marcus Luttrell, whoever we can that are, whoever we put forward that our military really wants to hear from, and not hear the same speech that they've given in the past, but more like a unique perspective. And I want it more interactive, where our troops get to ask all the questions that they want with these people.
Well, that's kind of cool. Instead of just being like a TED Talk where the guy goes up there for 15 minutes and runs his mouth, gets some really good questions from the crowd. I like that idea. I think that's a winner right there for sure.
Thank you.
What other avenues do you have outside of just the Clever Talk events? Are you doing more stuff with your online things? Are you doing any kind of webinars, teaching type of ideas coming through with Clever?
As of now, it's all focused on the conferences as well as Tactical Fest. Those are the two things that we focus on throughout the year. But in the meantime, if anything comes up, like a podcast, we haven't even started that, or like what you're doing, it's a great thing. I don't want to steal your thunder, but, maybe one day in the future we'll get to something like that.
Oh, yeah. That's, just with my podcast here, I started it because I was bringing speakers into my online classroom, and I decided, for a friend of mine who was listening to a couple of them, said, hey, you should share these with everybody. And so that's why we started doing the podcast. And so same kind of thing, was just giving back to everyone in the emergency management field and leadership, because in the end of the day, emergency managers are leading during crisis. And so it's about being able to step forward, being that leader during the time of crisis. So what have you learned over your time of doing the Clever Talks as far as like leadership and how to lead during crisis?
Well, what I've learned in terms of leadership is that there's so many little intricate pieces that could really change your life. And I was a shy person. I still am an introvert, but you got to know when to turn that off and adapt to the environment. One thing that I've learned from veterans is it's adapt or die. It's more about, find a way when there is no way. And that's the definition of clever, right? You got to find an answer when you don't have an answer. Or, one thing I've also learned from service members is your command presence, how you come across. That all says volumes. Like, I remember a good buddy of mine named Brady, a Marine, sharing with me, like, see how that guy walks over there? He would point out, and I'd look, and like, you could tell that's a civilian. But you see that guy, how he's walking, you could tell that's a Marine. And I'm like, wow, I started looking at the differences in posture, how people present themselves, how they talk, and it all circles back to that leadership.
Are you working more along the as you bring in people to speak, more along the leadership realms of things, or are you expanding broader on that?
So what we're trying to do is expand more on some of the issues that our military and families go through. Like, one of the talks that we're working with is this woman who's sharing like the beauty of receiving a care package and what that means to her while she's on deployment. So she's an active duty service member, and she's talking about what's it like. And so she's going to go on our stage and talk about, here's what this package looks like. This is how I feel when I'm working and I open this package. So she's like, that little intricate detail, the civilian world they take for granted, like a care package. I get that from FedEx every single day. But to a service member that only gets mail once every couple of weeks or whatever, it means the world. Or, what's it like from a spouse's perspective on deployment? How does she feel? This is the first day when her husband leaves. This is how she feels. So like a PowerPoint presentation on what's it like to be mom, dad, and the warrior while her husband's a warrior, so that's how she put it. It's like a 2-point. So yeah, we're finding intricate stories that we could branch out to the public instead of just the typical, not typical, but the constant leadership, or here's how you become this, or just thinking outside of the box.
Those are great. Those are actually great concepts. it is foreign to most people to understand what it's like to be there and to be able to bring some of that back and to be able to break that wall down. Like I said, it makes it easier for your transition back to the civilian world.
Right.
All right, Chris. Well, we're coming up here. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I definitely excited about talking to you about this. I'd like to talk to you more as things come about. And this idea of the Clever Talks, I am hooked. I've subscribed to the YouTube channel there, and
thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
And I'm going to share this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the links to Clever Talk to the YouTube channel, and if there's anything else that you'd like to share, go ahead and shoot that over to me, and I'll make sure it's in our notes.
Okay, thank you so much.
You have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you again, and I definitely look forward to going to TACFest and to the Clever Talks.
Absolutely. We're going to have a good time at the next one. Can't wait to see you then.